It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. There's a headline. 4 sanctuary city mayors prep for grilling in Congress this week. The mayors of Boston, Chicago, Denver, and New York City are prepping for a high-stakes hearing before the House Committee on Oversight and Government. Sanctuary city mayors owe the American people an explanation for city policies that jeopardize public safety and violate federal immigration law by releasing dangerous illegal aliens back into the streets. That's a quote from House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform Chair James Comer in a press release announcing the hearings, which are set to take place on Wednesday. The hearing, which will take place in front of a full committee, comes as so-called sanctuary cities, jurisdictions that limit cooperation with federal immigration authorities, have come under increasing scrutiny since President Donald Trump regained control of the House in January. While Trump has seemingly made quick work of the situation at the southern border, attention has turned to his promised mass deportation efforts, a process that can be helped along if state and local agencies work hand in hand with federal authorities. But we know that the sanctuary cities exist out there. Speaking of it, the Boston mayor is going to be there, Mayor Wu. This is really incredible because this story came out. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu raised eyebrows over the weekend as she expressed condolences to the family of a knife-wielding suspect who was shot and killed by an off-duty officer after he allegedly tried to stab 2 people on Saturday night. The suspect, whose identity was not released by police, had a knife near a Chick-fil-A in a busy part of the Massachusetts capital. He was fatally shot by an off-duty police officer who saw him targeting the 2 victims, police said. During a Saturday night press conference, the Boston Police Commissioner, also Michael Cox, said the officer identified himself to the suspect and asked him to drop his weapon. The individual was trying to stab the 2 individuals in the store, and the off-duty officer identified himself as a police officer, instructing him to drop the weapon, at which point the individual did not comply. Cox said the officer discharged his weapon to stop the threat. The individual was struck. The armed individual was taken to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead. Cox added he was proud of the police officers who activate themselves, whether it's on duty or off duty, to help save lives. After Cox and Suffolk County District Attorney Kevin Hayden both expressed some sadness over the loss of life during the incident, Wu notably did not express sympathy for the 2 people who were nearly stabbed by the suspect, just those impacted by the incident, which happened in one of the busier parts of Beantown. My condolences and all of our thoughts are with the family of the individual whose life was lost. Here's that actual quote. And then I think one of the police commissioners said the exact same. I mean, the words are exactly the same. I mean, it's like these are these talking points now that they're given? Here we go.
My condolences and all of our thoughts are with the family of the individual whose life has been lost.
Our thoughts and prayers are with the family and friends of the individual who's been lost.
It's almost the exact
identical.
Same. I know.
Almost identical there. It's well, you have to ask these questions here in the age of the left giving deference to the man who's suspected of murdering a healthcare CEO. You know, in today's age, this is the kind of thing you come to expect.
Journalist Jonathan Cho wrote, "It's all upside down in Boston. Boston, I'm going to say this as simply as I can. You desperately need a new mayor. Trust me." Fox News contributor Joe Concha, a former Boston resident, also weighed in on this incident. How exactly did Boston vote for this again? I live in the Black Bay area. I lived in the Black Bay area. It was one of the safest parts of the city. And she's offering condolences? Nancy Mace said, "Condolences from the mayor of Boston. Wait for it, to a knife-wielding man trying to kill people?" Thankfully, this guy was stopped in his tracks by a brave law enforcement officer. The incident came as Boston officials, including Wu and Cox, have attracted criticism from conservatives for implementing sanctuary city policies.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Catherine Vitale, a former Boston City Council candidate, told Fox and Friends last week she believes Wu doesn't care about crime in Boston. There's tons of crime almost every single day. There's a shooting. We don't always hear about them, but we hear them because we're there. I don't think that most of the crime actually even gets reported on. People don't get arrested. Charges don't get pressed on people who are looting stores. Wow. Wu is expected in Washington this week as part of the 4 Democratic mayors slated to testify before Congress on Sanctuary City. I bet you that comes up.
Yep. I bet it does. Well, that and, of course, all the other madness surrounding sanctuary city policy, especially where we are right now, because you don't win that with the American people. You only win that with the radicals. Supporting sanctuary city policy, the question would be, how long before it starts to fall away? Remember Mayor Adams going to the courts asking them to undo sanctuary city policy as the actual mayor of that city? Mm-hmm. His own party enacted that policy. And, the mayors have been maligned over and over again by all of us on the right, but the people that are in those cities, their citizens, more and more they know you can't keep up this kind of policy. Again, aside from the radicals, you see the polls.
You ready for this? I love how they write this. Self-styled moderate Democrats. What does self-styled mean?
What? People who call themselves moderates?
Self-styled moderate Democrats.
Okay.
All right, whatever. Moderate Democrats are pushing a future campaign message on the issue that defeated Kamala Harris. Don't talk about migration. Instead, Democrats should wrap themselves in the flag and patriotic imagery, says the 5-page strategy memo drafted by Third Way, a pseudo-moderate Democrat group that held a post-election comeback retreat in February. Embrace patriotism, community, and traditional American imagery like farms and main streets. God, they're so lost.
Yeah.
The memo mentions migration once, but only to slam the GOP's messaging on the issue. Democrats often let Republicans set the terms of cultural debates on crime and immigration instead of clearly defining their own positions in a way that resonates with voters. Wow. They just don't get it, do they?
No, they don't.
Politico published the memo, which says in early February of 2025, Third Way, gathered a group of highly experienced and passionate political professionals over 1.5 days to begin to chart the Democratic comeback. As part of this retreat, attendees participated in breakout sessions to deliberate on why Democrats are struggling with working-class voters around cultural issues, the nature of the economic trust gap with this critical group, and ideas for how to address both problems. The Third Way group likely leaked the memo to Politico, which described it as centrist in exchange. One of the Third Way founders is Jim Kessler. He worked for Schumer, who has twice lost control of the Senate due to his corporate-backed pro-migration policies.
Mm-hmm.
In 2013, for example, Kessler backed the Gang of Eight amnesty and cheap labor bill that cost the Democrats 5 seats in 2014. This memo outlines the best way to reach the conflicted middle using the keywords tough, fair, and practical, Kessler wrote. Those poll-tested terms were widely used by President Joe Biden's pro-migration border chief, Mayorkas, and by Kamala Harris's pro-migration 2024 campaign. But the poll-tested terms did not prevent Mayorkas's radical policies from pushing Donald Trump back into the White House and the Republicans back into the Senate's majority. I would love to be a fly on the wall on these things that they're having.
Yeah.
Because they just don't get it. Use a different word. Don't mention migration. Talk tough. Talk practical. Talk consistent. What was the other thing they said? Talk about. What was the other word that they used here? Embrace patriotism, community, and traditional imagery.
You know, don't be more like a Republican.
Well, no, because they're not telling them. They're just telling them to use imagery without any substance to back up that we've changed our position on the insane opinions on the issues that we hold.
Well, that's the thing. Because we all know Kamala Harris really wanted to build a wall.
Oh, it didn't work, did it?
It's changing your words does nothing. What they're really saying, think about this. We need to go back to really lying about what we believe in. You can't say it and get elected. Then once we get elected, you know. Obama. I believe marriage between a man and a woman. Then he got elected, and he was grappling.
At least you didn't say then he got married.
Yeah.
These
Yeah. There's an odd turn of events, right?
For all the conspiracy theorists out there.
If accurate and true. But it's it's the old age of the, that was then, this is now. But how do you get protesters out for you, right? How do you get the radicals out there, on the streets for you? If you're trying to say you're going to, well, what you're saying is, let's trick people into voting for us and then do something against them. Well, it doesn't work that way. Not anymore. You used to get away with it. Those days are over. Because now we are the media. Now we can follow at every turn. That's the other thing, too, that in the Obama years, 2008, 2007, 2008, when he was running, social media hadn't risen yet. And it really wasn't on the rise until after he was in office. So you kind of, we weren't the media. The public wasn't the media. And you could do some fact checking, but nobody really did. And these days, everybody does instantly. You ever see anybody ask you a question? Hey, whatever happened to that? And then they look down at their phone, they Google it instantly. They're doing research. That's not a bad thing. People are looking for the truth, and you can't hide from that. And if you want to lie and then all of a sudden change when you get in office, well, then, of course, that's going to affect you politically. You're going to get backlash. You won't get reelected. And there's no way around that anymore. They used to be able to get away with it because there was no way to really get into the weeds on what they actually believed and do your research on what they actually believe. You depended on, people like us. Talk radio or analysts or whatever. And now you have the truth in your hand, your cell phone.
Yeah.
And you can look it up. You are the media.
Yeah, for all the craziness you can find on social media, you can still find the truth.
Yep.
And it's easier than ever. It doesn't take us long to
Right.
find out what the actual truth is on any
Right.
issue.
Right. And so, you can't lie anymore. Democrats, you can't say, you need to sound more patriotic. Nope, can't do that. Nobody bought it from Kamala Harris.
866-90 Red Eye.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
Increases in what livestock producers receive price-wise for their commodities drove the latest uptick in USDA's Agricultural Prices Index for January. That 9.4% month-over-month increase in the Livestock Production Index reflected rises in all three categories. Poultry and egg producers received 17% more price-wise for their commodities in January. A 7.5% price received increase was reported for meat animal growers. And for dairy farmers, they recorded a 3.5% price increase in what they received price-wise from the previous month. The rise in the livestock index offset a 4.4% decline in prices received in the latest report. Increases in prices received for food and feed grains and oilseeds were offset by reductions in the price index for fruit and tree nuts and vegetables and melons. In total, producers received over 2% more in prices for their commodities in January. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
And Trinity Radio, he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. All right, I'm reading here that Bill Maher slammed the No Spend Day protest, calling for the economic blackout protest. So blanking stupid, he said. This is something called the People's Union USA, and they have something called, today I got emails about this from people, No Spend Day. And it's against the malign influence of billionaires, big corporations, and both major political parties on the lives of working Americans, Bill Maher said during his overtime section of his Friday show. And what is it? Is you refrain from making any purchases either in stores or online to shun fast food, getting gas for a full day. I know. That look on your face says it all. You're right. It's so effing stupid.
It's funny. We tore it apart, too, last week. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all.
This is why I was saying that there really is a movement of people doing interpretive dances to protest the Trump administration's cuts to USAID.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like people are starving. The thing about not winning, as you said, is you're left with these kind of absurdities. The answer is how to figure out how to win elections. So
Well,
Gary has been very critical of the Democrats, and he's the most liberal Democrat that there is.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Winning elections is going to require you to be honest on identifying the issues. You can't just say it, like we were talking in the last segment. You can't just say it. People have to believe that you're going to do it. Obama was new. He could promise anything because no one really knew who he was. Well, if you've been in office or been around for any amount of time, or if you've been vetted and people are vetting a lot more than they used to, well, you're not going to get away with that. You got to be honest.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Oh, and then we, what's his name? David Johansen died.
Yeah.
Buster Poindexter.
Right.
Yeah. The Ghost of Christmas
Past or
I forgot which one.
Or which
I-
one? And
I
it's
just-
Scrooged with Bill Murray.
I call him the taxi driver.
Right.
He was a taxi
He was a
driver
taxi
and
driver.
Scrooged.
Yeah.
Yeah, he died. Yeah.
Sad. He had cancer. He had been battling cancer, and the public really wasn't aware of it for years. Stage 4 cancer for several years, actually. And then he took a fall, and there was an injury recently, and his family had asked for donations to help pay for his medical treatment, but had a brain tumor, stage 4 cancer, brain tumor. And, you know, it's a sad situation.
Did you see the story on Mia Love?
75 years old.
Story on Mia Love?
Yeah.
She's basically in hospice now.
Yeah. And I had
I didn't, no idea that she had glioblastoma. No idea.
I had no idea. None whatsoever.
She's had it for a few years, too.
Right.
And this is it's the end game once you get the first operation.
Right. Yeah.
And a year and a half later is when most people don't make it, and that her family announced.
Yeah, glioblastoma, it basically embeds into the brain.
Yeah.
You can remove the main tumor, but it's only a matter of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's John McCain, Beau Biden, a number of individuals have died from it.
Neil Peart.
Neil Peart, yeah.
Peart.
Yeah. And
From Rush.
you and I refer to Mia Love quite often in the many years of identity politics and the left going after black conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
She was one of them. And when she was in office, and we had asked, you and I think off the air, maybe on the air, where she'd been lately, but now the news coming out. Former Representative Mia Love, who became the first black woman elected to Congress for the GOP, shared the new grim reality of her brain cancer diagnosis in a statement that was issued this past Saturday. The family of Love, she's 49, said she was diagnosed with glioblastoma and has now stopped all treatment for a malignant tumor as the disease has become too advanced. So, just a very sad situation.
You look at that. You look at stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and those are the two that you get where it's like, okay, it's done.
Yeah.
It's when you get it, with glioblastoma, because I've known enough celebrities that have had it and followed as they've gone through it. Once you get that first operation, and then you get some relief, but within a year and a half, normally, what is it, like 2 years, 2.5 years is almost the maximum.
Yeah.
And stage 4, pancreatic cancer, the same thing. When you look at that, so
our thoughts and prayers are with her, her family, her caregivers, anybody dealing with a situation like this. Certainly, she's the mother of 3.
just heartbreaking.
Becomes especially
Absolutely
heartbreaking when you think, and a lot of us have, in our older years, we become caretakers for our parents.
Yep.
If we're fortunate enough to have our parents as we grow old, it becomes you start living in a different role. But she's 49,
It was an interesting thing happened over the weekend. A couple of my friends, one talking about his mother and his visiting his mother, and she has dementia, Alzheimer's, really bad, and he just said, and we're good friends, and he just said, one can't help wondering that when you look at your mother and it's not your mother, you ask yourself, what is life?
Yeah.
And he was like, am I bad for having those thoughts? Like,
Oh, no. It's what we all go through.
Everyone goes through. That's what we told them. No, everyone goes through the exact, same thing. I've talked about my dad recently had pneumonia, and when he had pneumonia in the hospital, then he was in rehab afterwards. Because when you lay down for that length of time, you need to have physical rehabilitation when you're 99.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure you can walk and do everything. And with all the drugs he was on, antibiotics, I wondered, and I actually said to you, I wonder if I'll ever talk to my father, with 100% cognitive abilities. And I said that last week to you.
Yeah.
And the next day I talked to my father, and he was back to 100%.
Yeah.
Of where he was before. I mean, again,
Right.
a little bit slow and, losing it, but he was back to where he was. But those thoughts go through your head because you're like, I said to you, yeah, it means a lot to me to have my father there. Because he's been such a, I've talked about my father a lot, but I mean, he's got that engineering mind and never, ever stops, analyzing. And so my buddy was talking about his mother, because you're like, okay, when, I said, we understand when you say, is that life? Is that, when is a person gone? And I was like, yeah, well, the most painful thing, I think it can be at times, depending on who you are and how your personality is made up, that it's worse when you lose your parents when they're alive.
Yeah. Well,
when they're not there at all, when you get, very, very severe, late stage Alzheimer's, dementia, whatever. Yeah, it's
especially heartbreaking because the rest of us as, family members, you're also watching the other family members who are also caretakers go through their grief as the person is still alive. We're dealing with that, my wife and I, on two fronts now. And it's I've said our memories are really, you talked about music earlier, a song, boom, instantly takes you back.
Yeah.
Right. Those are things, life is really a collection of memories and your life, your experience. And as you go through that and, all of a sudden, boom, something will trigger a memory, an experience early in your life. It's magical. Sometimes you stop, you live in it for a moment, you go, wow, that was wild, or that was fun, or, and with that, you understand that person no longer has that, and they often misremember. In one case, with one family member currently, at times, she doesn't understand she's not living in her home. She's in a home and has caretakers, professional caretakers, but she's not living in her house. Doesn't understand what year it is, but last year, it was about this time last year, she was asked who the president was. She stated the wrong year, but when asked who's the president right now, she said, well, unfortunately, Joe Biden. So there was that moment of clarity, and we all had to laugh. It was a room full of people.
Well,
we all had that laugh.
One of the things that when my buddy brought it up, because he felt guilty for bringing it up. He said, because the basic question was, is this my mom?
Yeah.
If there are no memories and right. Of course he knows it's his mom,
right?
But he was just it's the shock.
It's the general question of what makes us,
right? And so it's the shock that he felt because he lives in a different town, than the rest of his family, and so when he saw her, he hadn't seen her in a while. I mean, that's a shock. And my other friend came up, I thought, he said, because it's true, sometimes there's no answers on this earth.
That we get right. Sometimes we don't get the answers.
Sometimes you just don't get the answer
to it. And it's but there are millions of us, that go through it, and there are countless stories. And we have another family member who, for her manifestation with the dementia is to go, and she will take everything out of a closet in a guest room, take all the pictures in that room and lay them out in front of her. And according to her doctors and caretakers, professional caretakers, she is living in her house. But they tell us, well, this is her looking to regain that memory, to remind herself, to answer a question about her past that she doesn't quite understand right now. And so you go through it, and for caretakers, it will often be tricky because you have those moments of clarity and then they're fleeting. So you want to tell yourself early on, especially before diagnosis, there's a lot of back and forth, and you want to tell yourself, it's this or it's that. But ultimately, like you said, there are no really clear answers. We have two family members, very different settings, but also very different manifestations of a really horrible disease.
For me, I mean, with my mom passed away almost 5 years ago now. But my dad, even because he'll be 99 in April, early April. But really at 93, 94, he was very, very quite active. I mean, he was still authoritative, and, he could yell at you, in a completely intimidating way. Mm-hmm. And you see physically, how they start losing it.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't like it, I could handle that.
Right.
And then last couple of weeks when I thought, is it dementia? Is it? And we were, open that it's the drugs because we didn't think that dementia happened this quickly because he was great Christmas time, and all of a sudden he got sick, and then boom, it just worse his mind.
Right.
That bothered me more, and then I think
that
bothered me a lot more because of my relationship I have with my father, the engineering mind that he has. That I look at my dad, his mind is. The be-all, end-all is with his mind, his critical thinking skills and everything else.
Yeah, sure.
And so that, for the last couple of weeks, there was some sadness and maybe even a little anger. But when the anger came, I go, what does anger come from? There's nothing you can do. I mean, it's not anger. I mean, sadness, yes.
Yeah.
But there was some anger because it's, that's, for the human spirit, your heart, your brain, your soul, which all comes from your brain because that's how you communicate what you are to everybody.
Then all of your experiences, and that's what your dad shares with you. I had a conversation with a gentleman named Tex McGill this weekend. I just met him. And a Texas Ranger, law enforcement, not baseball player, Texas Ranger for 34 years, and also served in the Navy in the Korean War. And he's in a wheelchair now, 92 years old. And had so many great stories. He and I talked for about 40 minutes straight. I was telling him my dad also served in the Navy on the USS Samuel N. Moore and also in Korea. And, then he pulls his Texas Rangers badge out of his pocket. You could see the smile on his face. He was proud. And I said, I can't thank you enough for your service, both as a Texas Ranger and in the military. But you sharing these moments with me, I'll cherish these forever.
Like when I did talk to my dad last week, and all of a sudden, boom, within a day, he was back 100%. I mean, we talked for almost an hour, 100%. What great joy that was.
Yeah.
It was really great joy.
Yeah.
866-90-RED-I.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-I on Red Eye Radio.
It's Friday Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. You know what we're going to hear starting probably today?
What's that?
As the Zelensky thing quiets down, and it'll be coming from Trump supporters. Nothing happened with Epstein on Friday.
Yeah. So Pam Bondi, the AG, basically wrote a letter to Director Kash Patel of the FBI. Hey, I want everything on my desk by Friday morning at 8 a.m. And I didn't see anything from Pam Bondi's office on Friday during the day that happened or didn't happen. I don't know.
The thing was, that just was a cluster, that entire thing.
Well, because I told you during the break, and that should have been, from day one, you should have told him to have everything on your desk.
Right. But the criticism didn't come from the left.
Right. Yeah.
Almost all of it was exclusively Trump supporters.
Right. Yep.
Wow.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.